Make sure to always lock your doors. 23-year-old guy here. I live in a pretty safe neighborhood, and I usually always lock my doors. Last night, I apparently did not. It was not too long after I had taken my dogs out for the last time and was turning off the television and lights when one of my dogs started growling. Not too weird since he sometimes does that when people walk by the house. He only does it to certain people, not everyone. I then heard the front door open and someone walk in. My dog then started barking. My other dog, who loves all people, came running from the other room to greet our guest. At the same time, I was reacting to what was happening and said, "What the heck? Who are you?" Standing in the hall was a guy in his mid to late 20s. He was skinny and tall. Oh wait, I don't think I'm in the right place. He genuinely seemed confused. I replied with, "Hell no you aren't, please get out." He apologized and said he was coming to hang out with a friend and had accidentally gone to the wrong place. I asked him what house he was looking for, and he said a number that was just a few numbers off from mine. He apologized again and left. He seemed nice and non-threatening, but I was still kind of spooked. This morning I was ready to laugh the whole thing off. I was planning on telling my neighbor, a couple in their 30s, what happened. I do not know them all that well, but we have talked before. Luckily I caught up with one of them when I was taking my dogs out. I did not want to come off like I was mad or scared over what happened, so I casually said, "I'm sure he told you about it, but your friend paid me a surprise visit last night." My neighbor gave me a confused look and said, "What are you talking about?" "Your friend. He walked into my house last night thinking it was your place." My neighbor was quiet for a second, and then said, "I don't want to alarm you, but I have no idea what you're talking about. We did not have a friend over last night." That ending. Every single time. And if that made the hair on your arms stand up, wait until you hear what happened to a mom at a Walmart when nobody else was paying attention. Watch your kids in the stores. I am 30 years old. I saw this little girl at Walmart not too long ago, running around in the toy aisles. She must have run past me 4 or 5 times, and every time she did, a man would be right behind her on her tail. For some reason, I could feel something was off. I stopped the little girl and asked her if she was lost. She said yes. I said, "This man isn't your daddy," and with almost tears in her eyes, she looked at him and slowly looked back at me and said, "No." I grabbed her by the hand and told her we were going to go up to the front to have them call for her mommy, as the man was still in our aisle. I gripped her a little harder when we walked past him and went to the front of the store, walking right past the man and looking him straight in the eye. And he just gave me this side smirk that to this day makes the hair raise on my entire body. Had I not stopped that little girl and brought her to the front to find her mom, I am genuinely scared to know what would have happened to her. That smirk, that detail alone. Some people do not even try to hide it. The next story is about a mom who gave her kids a $10 tool that may have saved their lives. I brought my 2 stepsons safety whistles to wear, and today they actually used them in a very alarming situation. My stepsons are 7 and 10. They play with 5 other boys in our area who are of similar age and all go to the same school in our neighborhood. There is a police station in our neighborhood, and we live in a city that is large, but we feel very safe. When they want to go to the park or play with friends, my husband and I agreed it is okay. They will be gone for hours going from house to house, swimming, jumping on trampolines, and skateboarding. I am in contact with other parents by text, so we have a pretty safe system. However, our state has been known for human trafficking because we are close enough to the border. It is just something I worry about. So I bought them bright orange safety whistles and tied them to their backpacks. At home, I had them each blow into the whistle as hard as they could so they knew how loud it was, and to only use it for emergencies, which we discussed. Today, on break from school, the kids wanted to do a lemonade stand. Something in my gut told me to say no. That was not a good idea, even though they had their own little garage sale around Christmas to make money to buy gifts, and the neighborhood thought it was so cute. Today felt different for me. As my older stepson was making his signs, I reminded him about interacting with strangers and that he needs to watch his brother. He asked me, "Should I bring my whistle?" I said, "Yes, great idea." I took it off his backpack and put it around his neck and told him I was going to leave the window open. If you feel scared or if something happens, you blow that whistle like there is no tomorrow, and I will run outside. They were right on our street corner, right where the main road through our neighborhood is. About an hour or so goes by, and I am into a documentary when I hear that whistle and my stomach drops. I dash outside to see a flashy red car. I believe it was a Dodge Challenger. And I immediately see all kids are accounted for as the guy is getting back into his car. My older son tells me the man got out of the car and was talking to the kids, asking their ages, and had invited my younger son to get into his car. I told my older son earlier, do not get into or near anyone's cars. So when the man made that invitation, he said he did not feel safe anymore and blew that whistle as hard as he could. The man was getting into his car as I was making sure the kids were accounted for. I pounded on his hood, asking him why he would ever invite a child into his car before he drove away. I was not thinking clearly and was in a bit of a panic. I did not get his plates. I was right there. I am so pissed at myself for that. The police said they searched our entire neighborhood for the car and put out a description of the guy and the car, which now possibly has a dented hood, and they put out an alert and are taking this very seriously. I am so thankful for that $10 whistle. Sometimes you just know when something is about to go wrong. Make sure your kids have a plan for emergencies. They have instincts too, and there's just something about that gut feeling you should never ignore. $10, that's what it cost. Now from a parking lot in a neighborhood to miles of dense Oregon forest, alone, no signal, and 3 men who would not stop following her. To the farmer's 2 dogs that helped me, thank you. I am 32 years old, a mom and a wife, and one of my favorite things to do to get away for a little while is go on glorious long hikes in the woods. I had not been able to do it for over a year because of being pregnant and then having a newborn, but my son had just turned 1, and I had been focusing a lot on getting back into shape. Last week, my husband asked me what I wanted to do for Mother's Day, and I told him what I really wanted to do was go get lost in the woods for a couple of hours. The pun was absolutely not intended. I live in rural Oregon, and while my property is surrounded by farmlands, I have a friend who lives a couple miles up the road, whose property meets up with endless acres of Bureau of Land Management land. When it is not under contract, it is generally open to the public as long as you leave no trace. There are thousands of acres of dense forest, waterfalls and rivers, wildlife trails and fire access roads. There are definitely places where one could get turned around, especially because there is rarely any cell service. This specific area my friend and I have both hiked and ridden our horses on for years, so I was confident that the trails I planned to take up to a lookout point were safe to take alone. On any given day, I would not have been alone because I would have brought my wonderful dog with me, but unfortunately she had passed away when my son was 4 months old. I considered taking my friend's dog, but she ended up being locked in the house, and my friend was at work. Besides, I always carry a firearm while out, so I was not worried. The hike started out like any other. I took the main fire road down towards the river, crossed, and then took a specific trail that switched back up towards a ridge. From there, it was a 2-hour trek that bends, rises, and falls until you get to a clearing. From that clearing, it goes straight up for a long while to the lookout on some giant rocks. The hike is a good 4 hours round trip. I made it to the ridge and was walking along the trail when I heard voices. I did not want to run into people. I prefer to be alone, so I began preparing myself to politely say hi and continue on my way. However, that did not work out like I planned. The voices belonged to 3 men, probably around my age, walking very casually on the trail. It is not a sin to be a man, but when you are a woman out in the middle of nowhere and outnumbered, you tend to become a little vigilant. I said, "On your left," and offered a nod while passing, but one of them reached out and stopped me. He actually put his hand under my elbow and gave me a nudge. I turned around, thinking he had stumbled, but he launched into this conversation I cannot remember everything about. He was talking about where they were from and what a beautiful day it was and introducing themselves. All the while, I was slowly walking away. The other 2 joined in from time to time, but overall, I got this uneasy feeling about them. I tried a few times to end the conversation and speed ahead, but one of them would always ask a question, expecting an answer. Or if I picked up my pace, they picked up theirs as well. I even went as far as saying a proper goodbye and nice to meet you, but they would just follow right along. The tipping point was when I started asking strategic questions and got really offhanded answers. I specifically asked where they were going, and they all sort of glanced at each other, and then one of them said they were going to the waterfall. I know exactly where that waterfall is, and it was not in the general vicinity of us or where the trail was heading. This all bubbled up to a moment where the trail went up a steep bank, and you had to climb using rocks and the big root of a tree to continue on. They stopped in front of me and tried to convince me to come with them to the waterfall. I said no, and decided to use this moment to show them that I was carrying, hoping it would at least show them that I was capable of protecting myself if needed. I carried concealed at my hip, hidden under my shirt, so I casually lifted the bottom of my shirt and wiped my glasses. I could sense a feeling of nervousness go through one of them. He was just staring at me intensely. I was able to keep my cool and scramble up the steep bank first, getting ahead of them. And as soon as I was at the top, I just started running as fast as I could down the trail. I did not look back. I did not pause to listen. I did not even care if I left something behind. I just ran. Lucky for me, there was a deer trail that shot out to the side, eventually weaving through a thick bunch of brambles. I took it, carefully picking through and trying not to leave an obvious sign that I went that way. My plan was to go as downhill as possible to get to the bottom of the ridge so that I could backtrack my way down to the access road. However, that did not happen. I did eventually end up on another trail, but had no idea which one. After what felt like forever of walking, it just ended. When I turned around to walk the other way, it also disappeared into a deer trail that went literally nowhere. At this point, my only option was to pick my way back up the ridge, hopefully find the original trail, and avoid those men, as they would have been further away by now. The problem was that no matter how much I went back and forth on the little dead-end trail, I could not find a spot where I came down. It was terrifying, and I could feel myself starting to panic. I found a good spot and decided to have lunch. I guess tuna sandwiches are pretty smelly, because as I was trying not to cry my eyes out, these two random dogs came walking up the trail. They were Great Pyrenees, and if I had to guess, belonged to somebody who took very good care of them. They had no collars, but were really gentle and sat with me for a long time while I cried my heart out to them. I absolutely believe with every fiber of my being that something guided these two dogs to me. When I was done crying and had settled back down, they both stood up and, I kid you not, led me through the woods on a trek I would have never taken on my own. We went down random deer trails, over a rock field, and down into a valley that led up to a part of the access road I had never been to before. They walked with me all the way down to the part where I finally recognized where I was, and then came with me to my friend's house where I called my husband. In the end, we decided to call the non-emergency line and let them know of the strange behavior of those men, and I gave as many details as I could remember. Nothing bad ever happened, and I sometimes try to reason with myself that I was scared for nothing. They ended up running off soon after I called my husband, and I am kicking myself for not thinking to get a picture of them so I could find the owner and thank them. So if anybody has a pair of guardian dogs that often go missing from your property, just know that they might be out there helping somebody in need. Those dogs. I have absolutely no rational explanation for that. None. Okay, take a breath, because the next one takes us to a tiny Texas town where a gas station attendant gave a woman directions to the middle of nowhere. My hills have eyes moment in Texas. In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans, Louisiana to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, 24 years old, female, and my 2-year-old pit bull in a 14-foot moving truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a flip phone, and a printed-out MapQuest direction sheet. Cell phone service was also much spottier back then, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I had not seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant moving truck was really low on gas. Just when I was starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I saw a small town coming up. I pulled into this town and it was tiny. There were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I went to gas up and was ready to get back on the road. Except I couldn't for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circled the town about 4 times and started getting so frustrated because this was such a tiny town. How could I not find my way out? I could literally see the highway, but could not get to it. I returned to the gas station to ask for directions. When I got gas, I had paid at the pump and never went inside. When I entered for directions, there was a skinny, nondescript guy who had black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looked like it could use a good wash. He was not particularly creepy, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes and was looking down at a magazine. He gave me directions that did not sound right at all. He was telling me to take a road that would get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I was dumbfounded. I pointed out that I had not driven that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far to get back? I could literally see the highway from the town. He was so casual, almost like I was just an annoyance and could follow his directions or not. He gave some explanation about the road curving around that did not really make sense. He still did not look at me. Just whatever, I gave you your directions, and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I got into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I did not know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store in this little town, and short of knocking on doors, there was no one else to ask for directions. Then a big red pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulled up. Out stepped the quintessential Texan man, huge, husky, in flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turnoff right at the end of a small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles it was back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. "Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here." At that point I couldn't help it. I had to know. I asked him what happens if I drive, and I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. The Texan looked at me very intently and asked how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out, and usually only locals knew about it. He was quiet for a few minutes, and then asked what the attendant looked like, and if I had a map of the state. He went to his truck and grabbed a local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traced the route I described. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. The Texan told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me it was nothing but some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, and those were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the attendant from the gas station was part of this family and lived down that road. I will never forget the look in his eyes as he told me that. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts. I do not know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my moving truck or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully I did not have to find out. And I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texan strangers with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texan stranger. You really saved me, and I will always remember you with tons of love. I will never drive through a small town the same way again, ever. Now the next story does not involve a forest or a highway. It happened at a friend's sleepover, and it took years for anyone to figure out what was really going on. I think your daughter may have been drugged. When I was in the 7th grade, 12 years old, I would experience nausea, vomiting, and extreme sleepiness after spending the night at the house of a particular friend. Let's call her Erin. This friend, also female, lived with her parents and her brother, who was 5 years older than us. After about 5 or 6 times experiencing these symptoms, my mom apparently noticed a pattern and sat me down to ask if I was drinking alcohol at Erin's. I remember laughing at that question because I had never even tasted alcohol at that point in my life. But my mom's question was very serious. I told her no and said I thought Erin's many pet rodents were making me feel ill. This sounded suspicious to my mom, so she did not let me spend the night at Erin's house anymore, but I was still allowed to spend the night at my other friends' houses. One night, I was with a group of friends. We had a movie night at Erin's house, then went to spend the night at my friend Sarah's house, where I had slept over many times without any problems. The next morning, I came home sick, nausea, vomiting, extreme sleepiness, and my mom took me to the doctor. She told the doctor that she believed me when I said I did not drink alcohol, but given my symptoms, the doctor ran a blood alcohol test on me, which came back at 0. He said that they could test my blood for certain sedative drugs, but that if I had ingested the substance, it would no longer be detectable. Given the circumstances, he informed my mother that I was likely drugged at Aaron's house, since that was the only common factor before my symptoms appeared. There was not enough evidence to press any charges, so my mom simply banned me from Aaron's house completely. After about 2 months of not going to Aaron's house, her older brother messaged me online and asked why I never came around anymore. He told me that he had recorded some things that I would like, so I should come over to watch them. I did not know what to say, so I deleted my account. I never told my parents about that message, but looking back now, Aaron's older brother was likely preying on me. She was 12 years old. 12. Let that sit with you for a moment. Now for the last story of today, and this one did not stay in the past. Years later, she found out exactly how close she had come to becoming a name in a documentary. I could have been one of Epstein's victims. I was watching the Jeffrey Epstein documentary on Netflix, and I was completely shaken. I literally had a mini panic attack, with memories flooding back as I was laying in bed watching. A girl's face flashed across the screen, and I recognized one of Epstein's victims as one of my really good childhood friends. I have lived in South Florida almost all my life with very controlling parents who would not let me do anything as a kid. No phone calls to friends, no extracurricular activities unless they were academic. Could not have friends over, and forget about going to anyone's house. When I went to middle school, I was so excited. Finally some freedom. My personality started to shine, and making friends came easy. A year in, I had become really good friends with 2 girls. Let's call them Heather and Sharon. They were both pretty, popular, and friendly. What fascinated me most was that Heather was the only girl in middle school I knew who was allowed to sleep over at a boy's house. It was something so foreign to me. She seemed like the coolest girl I had ever met. Throughout our friendship, we were known as the tripod. We had all the same classes and lunch periods, so we got pretty close. Over time, Heather would always ask me to hang out with her and Sharon after school or on weekends, but with my parents there was no way. I attempted multiple times to ask for permission, with no success. I always felt left out, something I would eventually become very grateful for. One day while sitting in the courtyard for lunch, Heather pulled me aside and asked what I thought about skipping school for one day. I instantly thought about the automated call the school sends home when you are absent. If my parents ever got that call, I would be in serious trouble. So I shut the idea down right away. But she would not stop asking. Eventually she convinced me, and we started planning. It took about a week of daily planning during lunch to figure out how to pull it off. The plan was to have my mom drop me off at school as usual, have the girls waiting for me, and we would walk off to the gas station near the school and have one of Heather's friends pick us up. Also, Heather made it a point several times to remind me that I needed to wear something that would give me an innocent look. I brushed this off, because I was already 13 years old. I looked innocent enough. The plan goes smoothly, and we are walking to the gas station. But as we walk, Heather's phone is constantly ringing and receiving texts. Each one she answers with, "Just meet us at the gas station like we usually do." I was confused because I thought it was supposed to be just the 3 of us. As we got closer to the gas station, I saw a group of about 7 other girls standing there, around the same age range, 12 to 14 years old. Some I had seen around school, others I did not recognize. They all perked up when they saw Heather walk up. All of a sudden Heather yelled, "Who's ready to make some money?" And almost all the girls raised their hands and started cheering. I grabbed Sharon and asked what she was talking about. And the look Sharon gave me is one I will never forget. It was like she was saying, "Get out now while you can." She never ended up saying anything. It was just strange, a big group of young girls who should have been in school, just standing at a gas station. As we were standing there, 2 black Lincoln Town cars pulled up and stopped right in front of us. Heather started numbering the girls and told the first group to get into the first car, and they sped away. The second one slowly rolled the window down. I saw an older man with sunglasses on, just sitting there smiling. He asked if we were ready to go to the mansion, which excited the 2 girls standing behind me. He opened the door, and they both jumped in, followed by Sharon. Heather was standing next to me and nudged me to get in. But I started going off on her, asking her what was going on, where we were going, who this man was and why she had not mentioned any of this. She looked almost annoyed at me and said, "Out of all the girls I bring, you're the only one giving me a problem. I thought you would want to finally have some fun, and with your body, you could make a killing." At the time, I was so naive, I did not know exactly what she meant, but by the tone of her voice and how pressured she was making me feel, I backed out and ran back to school. As embarrassed as I felt for bailing, I feared my mom a lot more, and going off in a car with someone I had never met screamed danger. After that, I barely hung out with Heather again. She tried a few more times, but I always got bad vibes from her and cut her off. I always saw her randomly walk out of school toward that gas station, always with a group of girls. Sharon, on the other hand, started to spiral into depression slowly. She would only hang out with Heather and would cling to her like a lost puppy. She started missing school more frequently until one day she just stopped coming altogether. Years later, I found out she had committed suicide, and recently, after watching the documentary, I am convinced she was one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims and that Heather was one of his recruiters. Every story today ends with someone alive, but only barely. A dog who growled at the right moment, a $10 whistle, a mother's gut feeling, a Texan stranger in a rusty pickup, a woman who ran. The scariest thing about every single one of these stories is that they are real, and they happen to ordinary people on ordinary days. If this gave you chills, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. And if you want more stories like these every week, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next one drops soon, and trust me, you will not want to miss it.